Our first inductee was Deacon George Clark. Deacon George Clark has a number of attributes that are spelled out in your program. I just like to put something in context. George Clark was the first person to have a house outside of the stockade. In the 1600s, book was surrounded by a palisade, which is a series of stakes in the ground. Most of us call it a stockade. They called it a palisade in those days. Because the danger was actually very real. My podium has arrived. That's all right. I'll it may not the town was surrounded by a palisade, and the danger was very real. Various Indian tribes would come and harass the settlers by throwing flaming brands into the city to try and burn out the settlers, and would mock the settlers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Is there a mic on this or just?
It's not
Not a problem. I'll speak loudly.
your lawyer's voice.
Fancy books.
This way, if I get tired, I can lean on it. So they would send flaming brands into the city, trying to burn up settlers. They would stand outside the palisades and mock the settlers with, "You're like pigs, you're hiding in your pen." And that's the history of Milford. George Clark was deacon of the church, and he was the first one to build outside of this our meeting community. His house still stands today. You can visit it at the foot of High Street. It's in the Milford Historical Society. And in token for that, he received a large portion of additional land. He was probably the richest person in Milford at the time. But his greatest claim to fame is he actually changed history. George Clark wrote a will. And in his will, he gave his firstborn son a double portion and something for all of the other children. Well, the firstborn son decided that was a bad idea because under English law, he was entitled to everything, of the rule of primogeniture. Well, his probate took 55 years. It went all the way to Parliament. And in Parliament, they decided that yes, George's will would survive and the other children would get something. That was quite a change from how things had been. In the English system, the firstborn son got it all. So your estate went on for generation after generation after generation. My other half is Irish, and the Irish did it a different way. We shared it with everybody. So if you travel the west of Ireland, you will find little stone walls guarding plots 20 foot by 10 foot, where you have real trouble farming. So the English system works very well for continuation of an estate, and that worked very well in our country right up until the 1930s, when the government decided you didn't need an estate, they wanted it. Our next inductee was Jared Ingersoll. Jared Ingersoll was a lawyer, and don't hold that against him, or me. Jared was probably one of the most astute individuals in the state of Connecticut in the 17th century, in the 18th century. His skills ran to commerce, and some of these things are spelled out in the booklet, so I won't delve into too much. But as part of the commerce he was engaged in, he represented large lumber companies. Of course, trees were the biggest thing that you had in Connecticut in the 16th and 17th century. Milford was a major port for shipping our lumber to England. Most people don't know that. Our harbor was once big enough for ocean-going vessels. It's silted up quite a bit since that time. Obviously not doable anymore. While in England, he was lobbying for his lumber company. He lost that, trying to make a good thing out of a bad thing. He talked to the Crown, And the Crown was very concerned about how much they were spending on us. I can't imagine the government being concerned about spending on us, but they were even in those days. What they did was they explained to him that they needed to tax us, and that tax was the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was the beginning of the end for the American colonies as a colony. It began the concerns about our revolution, and obviously resulted in our eventual both revolution and independence. He came back to America, lobbied the American people for the Stamp Act, saying, you know, hey, they're protecting us, they're building our roads, they're taking care of us, they're making us from the Spanish, we need to send them some money. American citizens reacted like American citizens do, no thanks. He was actually held, and that's described in the booklet, so I won't expound on too much. He was held by a number of patriots who decided that he should be tarred and feathered or worse, so as to relieve themselves of this terrible tax. In compensation for that, the Crown made him the highest ranking official ever to be born in Milford. And that is the head of the Admiralty Court in the District of Philadelphia. The revolution came while he was in office. They did not particularly trust him because of his Tory background, although they all had Tory backgrounds at that time. He retired to Connecticut, wound up dying in New Haven, and his epitaph can still be read in the New Haven cemetery, right downtown. Quite a history, and it's spelled out more in my article. The third is a personal favorite of mine, and that's Henry Sherman. Henry Sherman is probably the last Milford Indian. I'm not sure if it was full-blood or not, but he fought in the Civil War, lost an arm, and was given freedom of the city. The invitation that he received is an actual shot of Henry Sherman. It shows him next to his big brass drum, and he was honored to be part of the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, and served in that role until he died. We don't know when he was born, we don't know when he died, we don't know his address, but it was somewhere near Walnut Street here in Milford. And he's his most famous appellation is he would let out a war whoop after a long night on the town that would, quote, freeze your blood. The last two individuals, I had the honor of presenting T.J. Casey from Meg Casey, who might say a few words about her in life. She was probably one of the more significant people we've ever had in this community. She met with presidents. She traveled to Disney World with young people, and the note on her plaque and on the invitation, I think, speaks volumes. She had to speak for all of them because all the others were children. She suffered from progeria, but she did not let progeria make her suffer. She was above that. TJ, you want to say a few words?
I could briefly just want to thank you all for taking the opportunity to recognize me. She was the youngest of 6 boys and a girl. She survived us, and she was able to go on to great things in her own way. She was independent, and she worked with this city. She worked in many administrations in order to get handicapped accessibility here. Curb cuts were part of her mission. She was part of the commission on the handicapped, and she worked hard all her life. As we all are, we were born and bred in Milford, and she loved this town, and she loved to give back to you all. And congratulations to all the recipients tonight. She'd be honored to be here with you too. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. I met her a few times, and she was an inspiration. Lastly, we have Reverend Walker. Reverend Huff from the church up the street is here. Reverend Walker was the minister at the First Baptist Church during the 1960s, and I believe he's going to defer to the church historian, who is right in front of him. Stand up, or you're welcome to come here.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennyfer Holmes. I'm the daughter of Lillian Holmes, who was specifically asked by Dan, and I still call her Mayor Jago, to give a few personal words about the Reverend Charles D. Walker, from the perspective of someone who knew him really well and personally. So these are the words of my mother. It was a beautiful spring morning 45 years ago when I was in my front yard, readying the soil of God's great earth to plant flowers to further beautify the green of nature. Then all of a sudden, the sound of a traveling car came to a screeching halt. Looking up, I noticed that the car was backing up. And you have to know, we live on Oxford Road. It's a pretty busy street. The car then entered my driveway. Out stepped a gorgeous, wide, smiling woman with a beautiful afro who said, "Hello. To my surprise, I saw you. It looks like you live here. I was passing by and I just had to stop to say hello and to welcome you to Milford." Now, a lot of you will know what the next question was. Where do you go to church? But before I could respond, she proceeded to tell me about First Baptist Church and her pastor, the beloved Reverend Charles D. Walker. The genesis of several decade-long relationship with the Reverend Charles D. Walker began with her question, where do I go to church? And my answer and my first visit to First Baptist. Some months later, when my doorbell would ring, that is, ring 3 or 4 times a week, affectionately, I knew that it would be Reverend Walker at the door, sometimes accompanied by his wife, Esther. He was born in Triborough, North Carolina, raised in Hampton, Virginia, and he often shared a plethora of his life experiences. His experience being orphaned by his 4th birthday, his experience being emancipated at the age of 14, his experience as a butler, a cook, a poet, a property manager, an aircraft worker, a personnel manager, a civic leader, a gardener, and a pastor, his high calling for which he is recognized today, that his life's experience had so prepared him for. As members of the greater Milford community, Reverend Walker was known as both a civic leader and the pastor of First Baptist Church on North Street, which we invite you to visit any Sunday. As members of First Baptist, Reverend Walker was known by us all as a caring and dedicated pastor who saw his role in the community having both a spiritual and a civic aspect. He was known for his compassion and enduring love for children, as he would always invite the children to enter the middle aisle at the end of service and walk with him to the back of the sanctuary for his delivery of the benediction. And I was one of those children. And to some who were privileged to know him on a very personal level, we knew that Reverend Walker was an author. Even though unfinished, his novel, Unknown Journey, was written in the 1930s. And we knew him as a family man, married and widowed twice. After the death of his first wife, an admirer, Esther, shared that she would visit Reverend Walker. She would deliberately leave something like her gloves or a hat or a scarf so that he would have to bring them back to her. Reverend Walker would recount that he was keenly aware of her scheme but didn't mind one bit. Together they raised their beautiful daughter, Carol Ann. And to those who knew him as a historian, according to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, the Walker Papers, which were donated in 1988, are a combined collection consisting of personal papers, correspondence, and writings that documents what would be useful in the development of studies of African American Black life in the post-World War II North. And for me personally, I was privileged to have known him on a more personal level, and he not only performed the dedication of both of my daughters, but declared himself the honorary godfather of both. I am unable to be with you today because I am helping to take care of his new great-granddaughter, my first granddaughter in Northern Virginia. And so to our beloved Reverend Charles D. Walker, a godly man of many life experiences, May you continue to rest in God's and Milford's Hall of Fame.